Part 1. The Clockmaker's Curious Tea Garden. Literary Dreams. A bedtime story series. In a garden where all the clocks have learned to grow like flowers and time blooms and petals of every conceivable color, an elderly clockmaker named Kronos tends the most peculiar tea party that has ever been perpetually in progress. Unlike the frantic, riddling affairs of more famous gatherings, this tea party moves with the gentle rhythm of well-oiled clockwork, where every guest arrives exactly when they need to, and conversation flows like honey poured from a height that makes it spiral gracefully through the air before settling into perfect sweetness. The garden itself defies every reasonable expectation about how gardens ought to behave. Timepieces grow from stems like extraordinary flowers. Pocket watches dangle from delicate vines, their golden cases catching sunlight that somehow manages to be both morning fresh and afternoon mellow simultaneously. Grandfather clocks have taken root and stretched their pendulum cases skyward like strange trees, their steady ticking creating a percussion ensemble that would be overwhelming if it weren't so perfectly synchronized with the rhythm of peaceful heartbeats. Kronos discovered long ago that time, like any living thing, grows better when tended with patience and understanding rather than forced into rigid schedules that ignore its natural inclinations. His clocks bloom when they're ready, keep time according to their own internal wisdom, and chime not on the hour, but when someone nearby needs to be reminded that this moment, right now, is exactly where they belong. The tea table stretches in a perfect spiral around a magnificent clock tree whose pendulum leaves sway in harmonious time, marking not hours or minutes, but moments of perfect contentment. The tree's trunk shows a grain of polished mahogany, while its branches shimmer with the brass and silver of countless tiny mechanisms that catch and reflect light in patterns that shift like kaleidoscope images designed by someone who understands that beauty and function can be the same thing. The table itself appears to be carved from a single piece of wood, though closer inspection reveals it to be assembled from pieces of different time-keeping devices. Sections of clock faces serve as place settings, their numbers arranged not sequentially, but according to some deeper logic that ensures each guest sits exactly where they most need to be. The chairs rearrange themselves according to principles that make no earthly sense yet feel absolutely right. The shy guests find themselves in cozy corners where they can observe without being observed. The gregarious souls discover perfect conversational circles where their enthusiasm can spark similar joy in others, and those who need solitude are gently guided to peaceful alcoves where they can sip their tea in companionable silence. Kronos himself is a marvel of gentle eccentricity, a man who has spent so many years working with the mechanisms of time that he has begun to resemble his creations in the most charming ways. His white hair springs from his head in patterns that mirror the spiral springs of his finest watches, and his eyes twinkle with the steady precision of well-maintained clockwork. He wears a waistcoat embroidered with tiny gears and springs that actually function, creating soft mechanical music as he moves. And his spectacles are fitted with multiple lenses that can be adjusted not just for vision, but for seeing time itself in all its various forms and frequencies. These remarkable spectacles show not what is, but what might be wonderful if one looks with the right sort of eyes. Through them, Kronos can see the temporal currents that flow through his garden, the way past and future swirl together like cream stirred into tea, creating patterns of possibility that help him understand when to plant new timepieces, and when to allow old ones to rest in the peaceful retirement that all good clocks eventually earn. His tea service defies ordinary physics with the cheerful determination of someone who has never quite believed that physics ought to be taken too seriously. Teapots pour upward in graceful arcs, their streams of tea creating temporary bridges of liquid warmth that guests can walk across to reach different sections of the spiral table. The tea itself tastes different depending on which direction it's poured. Clockwise tea carries the bright energy of beginnings and morning possibilities, while counterclockwise tea offers a gentle satisfaction of completions and evening contentment. Cups warm themselves to the perfect temperature for each individual guest, somehow knowing that Eleanor prefers her tea just shy of scalding while Marcus likes his barely warmer than room temperature, and Catherine requires a precise heat that brings out the subtle floral notes in the special blend that Kronos prepares exclusively for souls who paint pictures with words instead of pigments. Sugar cubes dissolve into sweetness while somehow making the tea lighter rather than heavier, defying gravity with the same gentle insistence that allows timepieces to bloom like roses and conversation to flow backward from conclusions to premises without losing any of its logical coherence. The guests who find their way to this perpetual tea party are creatures of dream logic who have discovered that the most sensible response to a nonsensical world is to embrace one's own delightful impossibility. There are rabbits who have learned to slow down and appreciate the journey rather than worry about being late. Their pocket watches now worn purely for decoration, since they've discovered that arriving precisely when one means to is far more satisfying than rushing toward arbitrary deadlines imposed by others who haven't learned to live on time's natural rhythm. The Cheshire cats who frequent the garden have evolved beyond their famous grins. Their pleasure with the world now so complete that they've forgotten to disappear entirely, existing as shimmering, translucent beings whose happiness has become their most substantial quality. They serve as unofficial hosts, welcoming newcomers with purrs that sound like perfectly tuned clock mechanisms, and offering guidance to guests who haven't yet learned to navigate conversations that begin with dessert and work backward to the meal to arrive at introductions. Playing cards have abandoned their royal duties and discovered that gardening provides far more satisfaction than the endless painting of roses. They tend flower beds where each bloom shows a different suit in living petals, hearts that pulse with gentle warmth, diamonds that sparkle with crystalline clarity, clubs that provide sturdy shade for more delicate flowers, and spades that have learned to dig not graves but gardens where beautiful things can grow. These card gardeners have developed their own horticultural philosophy based on the principle that every flower, like every card in a deck, has its proper place and function in creating something larger and more beautiful than any individual element. The tea party's rhythm follows a natural flow of perfect conversation, where topics emerge organically from shared observation and genuine curiosity rather than being forced through social obligation or nervous energy. Guests discuss the comparative merits of different methods for growing sundials, whether they respond better to morning encouragement or evening appreciation, and debate the proper care for cuckoo clocks that have learned to sing entirely new songs inspired by their interactions with actual birds who nest in their wooden cases. Whether clocks receive particular attention, as these delicate instruments require understanding of both meteorology and psychology to function properly. They predict not just rain or sunshine, but the emotional climate that will prevail in the garden, allowing Kronos to prepare appropriate teas and arrange seating to ensure that guests who need cheering up find themselves near sources of gentle humor, while those who require quiet contemplation are positioned where they can absorb the deeper peace that emanates from the oldest and wisest timepieces. The conversation moves with the gentle persistence of well-wound clockwork, each participant contributing observations that connect naturally to what came before while opening possibilities for what might come next. Stories unfold not through dramatic tension, but through the accumulation of delightful details. Tales of alarm clocks that have learned to wake people with gradually increasing birdsong instead of jarring buzzes, or chronicles of stopwatches that time not athletic events but moments of perfect happiness, helping people understand exactly how long joy lasts when properly attended to. Riddles arise naturally from the garden's curious nature, but these puzzles exist not to frustrate or exclude, but to invite deeper consideration of the wonderful strangeness that surrounds ordinary life when viewed from the right angle. Why do broken clocks still show the correct time twice each day? And what does this teach about the nature of accuracy? How can a clock that runs backwards still help people arrive on time for important appointments? And what might this suggest about the relationship between punctuality and purpose? The answers to these questions emerge through collective contemplation rather than competitive solving, as guests discover that shared wondering often proves more valuable than individual cleverness. The garden itself participates in these discussions, offering evidence through the behavior of its curious timepieces. Watches that speed up when their wearers are engaged in activities they love, demonstrating that time's passage depends as much on attention and engagement as on mechanical precision. As the afternoon that is also perpetually morning progresses toward an evening that somehow coexists with continuing daylight, the tea party's gentle rhythm begins to incorporate elements of peaceful closure without actually ending. New guests continue to arrive, drawn by the garden's welcoming atmosphere and the promise of conversation that values kindness over cleverness, while others begin to feel the pull of whatever gentle adventures await them beyond the garden's timepiece border paths. Departure from Kronos' tea party is never abrupt or final, but rather a gradual transition, like the shift from one movement to another in a musical composition. Guests find themselves naturally gravitating toward the garden's exits, carrying with them the memory of perfect conversation and the understanding that time, when properly appreciated, expands to accommodate whatever amount of joy and connection it's asked to contain. Those who leave the garden discover that they carry within them a small portion of its temporal magic, the ability to find pockets of unhurried time even in the midst of busy days, the skill of arriving exactly when they mean to regardless of what clocks might suggest, and most precious of all, the knowledge that somewhere in the space between seconds, there exists a place where time grows like flowers, and every moment blooms with the possibility of perfect contentment. The garden continues its gentle existence, always ready to welcome new guests who find themselves in need of conversation that makes sense without needing to be logical, tea that tastes like liquid happiness, and the companionship of souls who have learned that the best response to life's curious impossibilities is not confusion but wonder, not resistance, but the kind of graceful acceptance that allows even the most serious hearts to remember what it feels like to play with time instead of being driven by it. In the soft light that filters through pendulum leaves and reflects off the faces of countless timepieces, Kronos continues his gentle tending of the sanctuary, where every moment is precisely the right moment for whatever needs to happen, and where time itself has learned to serve not as a master, but as a friend who helps souls discover the perfect rhythm for lives lived with both purpose and playfulness. The Library of Living Words. Part 2 of the Carroll trilogy, The Gentle Wonderlands. In a vast library where books write themselves and words occasionally escape their pages to flutter around the reading rooms like gentle butterflies made of meaning, a soft-spoken librarian named Lexica tends to stories that have grown tired of their original plots and wish to try something new. This is a place where fairy tales come to rest between tellings, where nursery rhymes practice new rhythms, and where all the words that were ever written with love find sanctuary when they need to remember their purpose. The library's architecture follows a logic of language rather than engineering. Sentences form corridors that curve according to their grammar. Paragraphs create reading nooks that expand or contract depending on the complexity of their ideas, and staircases spiral upward in the shape of question marks, leading to upper floors where the most contemplative stories reside. The card catalog is organized not alphabetically, but by the emotional state each book induces. Comfort, wonder, gentle melancholy, quiet joy, and that peculiar satisfaction that comes from understanding something without quite being able to explain it. Lexica herself appears to be constructed from the finest elements of language. Her hair flows like calligraphy, dark strokes that curve and flourish with each movement of her head, while her eyes sparkle with a particular gleam that comes from understanding puns in 7 languages simultaneously. Her dress rustles with the sound of turning pages, and when she walks, her footsteps create a gentle rhythm that sounds remarkably like iambic pentameter, though she claims this is entirely accidental and that she simply has a naturally literary gait. The escaped words that populate the library have developed their own charming ecosystem. Adjectives drift in colorful clouds through the upper galleries, occasionally settling on unsuspecting readers to improve their day. A lonely visitor might find themselves unexpectedly graced by cherished or delightful, while someone struggling with a difficult text could be blessed by the sudden appearance of clear or illuminating, hovering helpfully near their shoulder. Verbs bounce energetically from shelf to shelf, sometimes playing elaborate games of tag that result in wonderfully active sentences forming spontaneously in the air, visible for just long enough to make observers smile, before dissolving into gentle laughter. The most sociable of the escaped words are the conjunctions, which have appointed themselves as the library's unofficial greeters and guides, and is particularly outgoing, always eager to connect visitors with the books they didn't know they needed, while but serves as a gentle devil's advocate, helping readers see the other side of arguments and stories. Because it's become something of a philosopher, always ready to explain the deeper reasons why certain books call to certain souls, though its explanations tend to be circular and charmingly unhelpful in the most delightful way possible. This particular evening, Lexica has made a remarkable discovery in the library's deepest archives, a story that has been quietly rewriting itself for over a century, transforming from a tale of conquest and conflict into something entirely more nourishing. The book, originally titled The Iron General's Victory, now bears the golden-lettered title The Garden General's Feast, and its pages glow with the warm satisfaction and narrative that has found its true calling. The story tells of General Magnolia, formerly known as General Magnus, who discovered that her greatest victories came not from defeating enemies, but from converting battlefields into magnificent gardens where former adversaries could gather to share meals and stories. Her legendary tactical genius had been redirected toward the infinitely more complex challenge of designing seating arrangements that would encourage natural conversation between people who had previously thought of each other as enemies. Her strategic supply lines now delivered not weapons and ammunition but seeds, gardening tools, and the finest ingredients for a communal feast that could dissolve centuries of mistrust with a single perfectly seasoned soup. Lexica reads passages of the transformed tale aloud to a small audience of particularly attentive words that have gathered around her reading chair. The story describes how General Magnolia's first great revelation came during what should have been her most decisive battle, when she noticed that the enemy's soldiers were defending not treasures or territory, but a grove of fruit trees that their grandparents had planted. Rather than destroy the grove to claim victory, she instead proposed a harvest festival where both armies could enjoy the fruits together, leading to the discovery that shared appreciation for good food makes enemies into friends with remarkable efficiency. The words listening to Lexica's reading begin to shimmer with excitement as they recognize the profound transformation taking place in the story. Victory glows with a new understanding of what it means to win, while enemy gradually fades until it becomes almost transparent, eventually transforming into neighbor with a soft pop of semantic satisfaction. Battle undergoes the most dramatic change, stretching and reshaping itself until it becomes banquet, carrying with it all the strategic complexity of its former meaning, but redirected toward the infinitely more pleasant challenge of ensuring that everyone gets enough to eat and feels properly welcomed. As Lexica continues reading, more stories throughout the library begin to respond to the transformative energy radiating from the Garden General's tale. On the second floor, a collection of mystery novels starts glowing as the stories realize they can redirect their puzzle-solving energy toward the delightful mysteries of how to make strangers feel at home and how to create conversations that help people discover unexpected connections. The detective protagonists retain all their observational skills and deductive reasoning, but now they apply these talents to understanding what kinds of tea will comfort worried hearts and which subject of conversation will help shy souls feel confident enough to share their wisdom. In the poetry section, sonnets begin rearranging their rhyme schemes to create more soothing patterns, while free verse experiments with rhythms that match the human heartbeat at its most peaceful. The haikus discover that their traditional nature imagery can be expanded to include the seasons of the human heart, creating tiny perfect moments of recognition that help readers understand their own emotional weather with gentle acceptance rather than harsh judgment. The children's section experiences perhaps the most delightful transformation, as fairy tales remember that their original purpose was not to frighten young minds into compliance, but to provide them with the imaginative tools needed to transform difficulties into adventures. The wicked stepmothers realize that their truest nature is that of stern but ultimately loving guides who help heroes develop resilience and creativity. Dragons discover that their fire-breathing abilities are perfectly suited to cooking magnificent feasts rather than terrorizing villages, and their treasure-hoarding instincts transform into a generous desire to collect wonderful stories and experiences to share with visitors. Lexica moves to the library, observing these spontaneous transformations with a satisfied smile of someone who understands that stories, like gardens, flourish when they're allowed to grow according to their deepest nature rather than forced into shapes that deny their essential goodness. She carries with her a special watering can fill with liquid encouragement, a substance that looks like ordinary water but contains concentrated appreciation, gentle suggestion, and the kind of loving attention that helps all growing things reach their fullest potential. The most magical moment of the evening occurs when Lexica discovers that the escaped words have begun collaborating to create entirely new stories, working together with the innocent joy of children building castles from blocks. Prepositions like between and within have partnered with nouns like friendship and understanding to construct narrative bridges that connect previously separate stories into larger, more satisfying wholes. Articles like the end A serve as gentle guides, helping readers navigate from one story to another with the assurance that each tale will enhance rather than contradict the others. The library's evening ritual begins as the natural light fading through the tall windows mingles with the warm glow emanating from the transformed stories. Lexica lights the reading lamps, not with oil or electricity, but with the still contentment that creates illumination perfect for bedtime reading. The light reveals not just the words on the pages, but the emotional undertones and hidden connections that make stories truly nourishing to the soul. As closing time approaches, though in this library, Closing time is more of a gentle suggestion than a firm requirement. Lexica performs her final duty of the day. She gathers up the words that have finished their evening adventures and helps them settle back into their proper stories. Though proper here means whatever arrangement brings each word the most satisfaction. Some words have found new homes in different books, having discovered narrative contexts that suit them better than their original placements, while others return to their familiar positions with new understanding of how their individual meanings contribute to the larger purposes of their stories. The library grows quiet as stories settle into their nighttime rest, but it is a satisfied quiet of work well done and transformations successfully completed rather than the empty silence of abandonment. Books have found their true purposes glow gently in the darkness, providing just enough light to guide any late-night visitors toward exactly the stories they need to read before sleep. In her final rounds, Lexica whispers gentle encouragements to the stories that are still in the process of transformation, reminding them that change takes time and that the most beautiful metamorphoses often happen slowly, one word at a time. She adjusts the temperature and humidity to optimal levels for paper and ink, but also for dreams and inspiration, ensuring that the library will continue its gentle work of transformation even while she sleeps. The last sight she sees before extinguishing her reading lamp is a small gathering of words that have formed themselves into a message of gratitude. Thank you for helping us remember who we really are. The words pulse gently with their own inner light before dispersing to rejoin their stories, leaving Lexica with a deep satisfaction that comes from tending a garden where language grows according to its highest nature, where stories transform themselves into vehicles for comfort and wisdom, and where words fulfill their ultimate purpose of bringing understanding and connection to all who seek the gentle magic of meaning shared with love. The Backwards Day Cafe, Part 3 of the Carroll trilogy, The Gentle Wonderlands. At the edge of a town where every day is Backwards Day, but no one seems particularly bothered by this arrangement, stand a cafe where effects arrive before causes. Dessert is served before appetizers, though somehow this makes both taste better, and conversations end with hello and begin with goodbye, creating a peculiar intimacy where strangers part as old friends having shared their conclusions before their introductions. The cafe itself appears to have been built from the inside out, with the kitchen positioned at what should be the entrance and the front door tucked away behind the pantry, accessible only to those who have already finished their meal and are ready to leave. Though paradoxically, this means that everyone who enters has somehow already experienced the satisfaction of a perfect dining experience, which makes them tremendously pleasant company from the very first moment. The windows look backward into yesterday's weather while the doors open forward into tomorrow's possibilities, creating a present moment that feels unusually spacious and welcoming. Consequentia, the proprietor, embodies the cafe's temporal philosophy with a practice of beginning each day by expressing gratitude for events that haven't happened yet, and ending each evening by planning yesterday's activities. She appears to be approximately middle-aged, though her age seems to flow backward and forward depending on her mood and the needs of her customers. When serving elderly patrons, she radiates the wisdom of someone who has seen it all before, while younger visitors find themselves attended by someone who clearly remembers the excitement of experiencing everything for first time. Her appearance defies conventional description because it changes to complement whatever her customers need to see. Sometimes she appears as a motherly figure whose very presence suggests that everything will work out fine. Other times as an energetic entrepreneur whose enthusiasm makes even the most mundane interactions feel like grand adventures. Her apron bears the cafe's motto embroidered in thread that changes color as you read it. Dessert first, regrets never, friends always. The cafe's menu operates on the principle that people always know what they want to eat once they've finished eating it. So orders are taken after meals are consumed and payment is requested before customers realize they're hungry. This system eliminates entirely the stress of choosing from too many options, while ensuring that everyone receives exactly what they need to nourish both body and soul. The prices are listed in units of satisfaction rather than currency. A bowl of soup might cost 3 moments of genuine contentment, while the chef's special requires 1 hearty laugh shared with stranger. Regular customers have learned to navigate the cafe's temporal peculiarities with the easy grace of people who have discovered that many of life's complications disappear when approached from unexpected directions. Professor Temporal, an elderly gentleman who claims to have invented the concept of punctuality only to reject it as too limiting, arrives precisely 5 minutes after he needs to leave, which somehow allows him to have leisurely conversations while never being late for his appointments. His backwards pocket watch runs counterclockwise, but keeps perfect time for a day that flows in reverse. Miranda the musician has found that playing her violin backwards, beginning with a final note and working toward the opening phrase, creates melodies that start with resolution and move toward anticipation, resulting in music that leaves listeners feeling hopeful rather than wistful. She often performs for the cafe's patrons, her backwards concerts creating an atmosphere where endings feel like beginnings and farewells carry the excitement of new meetings. Young Timothy, the backward student, has revolutionized his approach to education by starting with the answers and working backward to understand the questions. This method has made him remarkably wise for his age, as he approaches each new subject with the satisfaction of someone who already knows where the learning will lead, allowing him to appreciate each step of the discovery process without the anxiety of uncertainty. His homework is always completed before it's assigned, and his test scores improve as he forgets the correct answers and learns to think through problems from first principles. The most remarkable feature of the cafe is its collection of backwards clocks, each of which tells time according to a different philosophical principle. The regret clock runs backward fastest when customers are dwelling on past mistakes, encouraging them to move forward by literally watching time reverse until they reach a moment before the regret began. The anticipation clock speeds up in reverse when people are too focused on future worries, helping them return to the present moment by showing them time moving backward toward the current instant. The nostalgia clock moves backward through personal history, allowing customers to revisit cherished memories not as escape from the present, but as a way of understanding how past joys can inform current possibilities. The wonder clock runs backward to the history of questions, helping visitors understand that the most profound mysteries become more rather than less mysterious as one learns more about them, creating a delightful sense of expanding curiosity rather than diminishing awe. This particular evening, which is actually tomorrow morning in the cafe's temporal framework, consequently prepares for a favorite daily ritual, the backwards dinner party, where guests begin by expressing gratitude for friendship they're about to develop and end by introducing themselves to people they now consider dear companions. The party attracts souls who are ready to experience connection in a new way, approaching relationships from the perspective of their eventual fulfillment rather than their uncertain beginnings. Tonight's guests arrive with the satisfaction of having already enjoyed a wonderful evening, which create an atmosphere of relaxed anticipation that makes genuine conversation remarkably easy. Dr. Eleanor Sage, a retired physician who spent her career working forward through medical problems from symptom to cure, now delights in the cafe's approach of beginning with wellness and working backward to understand how health is maintained. She's discovered that this perspective makes her appreciate the miracle of feeling good rather than taking it for granted. Arthur the inventor brings with him a collection of backwards devices that solve problems by undoing their causes rather than addressing their effects. His backwards umbrella collects raindrops and returns them to the clouds where they belong, while his reverse compass points not toward magnetic north, but toward true contentment, its needle spinning to indicate the direction that will lead to the most satisfying experiences. The evening's meal exemplifies the cafe's culinary philosophy, beginning with dessert that tastes like the memory of satisfaction, a confection that grows more delicious as it's eaten, leaving diners with a pleasant anticipation of flavor rather than the fading echo of sweetness. The main course consists of ingredients that have been cooked by removing heat rather than adding it, resulting in dishes that somehow capture the essence of nourishment without the heaviness of overeating. The appetizers arrive as conversations are winding down, providing perfect accompaniments to the philosophical discussions that naturally develop when people begin relationships from the perspective of their ultimate potential. These small plates contain concentrated experiences rather than mere food, a bite of salad that tastes like the first day of spring, bread that carries the satisfaction of work completed with love, and soup that warms the soul with the feeling of being truly understood by caring friends. As the backwards evening progresses, guests find themselves naturally arranged in conversational groups that facilitate exactly the kinds of exchanges each person needs. Dr. Sage discovers herself in discussion with Arthur about the healing properties of inventions that prevent problems rather than solving them, while other patrons gather around Professor Temporal as he explains his theory that true punctuality means arriving at the exact moment when your presence will be most appreciated, regardless of what clocks might say about scheduled times. The cafe's backwards music system plays songs in reverse chronological order, beginning with the most recent compositions and working backward through musical history, allowing listeners to trace the evolution of melody and harmony in reverse until they reach the pure, simple rhythms that represent music's essential nature. This backwards journey through sound creates a sense of approaching the source of all music, making even familiar songs feel fresh and full of possibility. Consequentia moves through the evening's activities with the graceful efficiency of someone who has already experienced the satisfaction of a successful gathering, her attention free to focus on the subtle adjustments that ensure each guest feels perfectly welcomed and understood. She refills coffee cups before they empty, brings comfortable cushions to chairs just as their occupants begin to feel restless, and introduces visitors to exactly the people they most need to meet at precisely the moments when they're most ready for new friendships. The evening's climax occurs when all the guests simultaneously realize that they've been participating in something much more significant than an unusual dining experience. They've been learning a new way of approaching life that begins with appreciation and works backward to understand how grateful moments are created. This insight arrives not as a dramatic revelation, but as a gentle recognition, like remembering something they've always known but temporarily forgotten. As the backwards evening concludes, which means it's time for the real beginning, guests prepare to depart with the warm satisfaction of having discovered kindred spirits and the anticipation of future gatherings that feel like reunions with old friends. They exchange contact information by sharing what they hope to learn from each other, creating the foundation for relationships built on mutual appreciation rather than mutual need. The cafe's farewell ritual involves guests expressing gratitude for experiences they haven't had yet, thanking each other for future kindnesses, acknowledging conversations that will happen next time they meet, and sharing appreciation for friendship that will grow from this backwards beginning. These advanced thanks create a form of positive expectation that naturally leads to fulfillment of the very experiences being anticipated. Consequentia performs her closing routine by opening all the windows to welcome tomorrow's fresh air and setting out flowers that will bloom during the night, their fragrance ready to greet the first customers who will enter backward through the kitchen door, having already enjoyed the perfect breakfast that will motivate them to visit. She counts the day's earnings in units of satisfaction and deposits them in the bank of good intentions, where accumulated contentment accrues interest in the form of increased capacity for joy. The final image of the evening is Consequentia settling into her favorite chair with a cup of goodbye coffee, a special blend that tastes like farewells that are really beginnings, hellos that contain the warmth of established friendship, and a peculiar satisfaction that comes from understanding that every ending is simply another way of starting, every departure a form of arrival, and every moment of confusion an opportunity to discover that wisdom often appears when we stop insisting that it makes sense before we're willing to trust its guidance. The Innkeeper of the Twilight Road, Part 4 of the Tolkien trilogy, The Deeper Comforts, along a winding road that exists in an eternal hour of gloaming, where the day's heat has passed but night's chill has not yet arrived, stands in that appears to weary travelers exactly when their need for rest becomes most urgent. The Green Dragon's respite serves as sanctuary for all who walk the longer roads of life, offering not just shelter for the body, but restoration for the spirit that can only be found in places where hospitality has been elevated to an art form. The inn materializes from the gathering dusk like a warm memory made manifest, its golden windows casting pools of honey-colored light across the worn cobblestones of the courtyard. Ivy climbs the stone walls in patterns that seem to shift gently in the evening breeze, and the wooden sign creaks on its iron chains with a sound that speaks of countless seasons weathered and countless travelers welcomed. Smoke rises from multiple chimneys in lazy spirals that carry the mingled scent of hearth fires, baking bread, and particular comfort that comes from knowing that somewhere in the world, preparations are always being made to welcome the wanderer home. Barley Good Bottle, the innkeeper, embodies the finest traditions of his calling with a presence that immediately puts the most anxious traveler at ease. His round face bears the lines that come from decades of genuine smiles, and his eyes hold a particular warmth that develops in those who have made it their life's work to ensure that no one sleeps cold or hungry if they can prevent it. His vest strains slightly over a comfortable belly that speaks of someone who believes that food tastes better when shared, and his hands, though soft from a life spent indoors, bear the honest calluses that come from work done with love rather than mere duty. The inn's common room represents a perfection of comfortable gathering spaces, with low oak beams that create intimate conversation areas, while maintaining the open warmth that encourages community. The massive stone fireplace dominates one wall, its hearth large enough to accommodate a dozen people on the curved bench built into its interior, where the oldest and most weathered travelers naturally gravitate to share the fire's direct warmth. The flames burn wood from every corner of Middle-earth. Oak from the Shire, pine from the misty mountains, and birch from the forest of Lothlorien, creating a fire that speaks in the ancient languages of all trees and offers comfort that reaches deeper than physical warmth. The furnishings have achieved that perfect state of well-worn comfort that only develops when furniture is chosen for use rather than show, and maintained with the kind of care that comes from understanding that true luxury lies not in appearance, but in the ability to provide rest to weary bones and peace to troubled hearts. The chairs have been shaped by countless bodies seeking respite, their arms worn smooth by the grateful touch of hands that have found refuge, their cushions molded to provide support exactly where it's needed most. Tonight, the inn welcomes a particularly diverse gathering of travelers, each carrying their own burdens and seeking their own form of restoration. Thorin Ironfoot, an elderly dwarfsmith, arrives as the first stars appear, his pack containing not just the tools of his trade, but carefully wrapped gifts for grandchildren he has never met. Intricate toys carved from precious woods, tiny jewelry boxes inlaid with stones that catch the light like captured rainbows, and storybooks bound in leather and illustrated with his own patient hand. His journey home represents the completion of a lifetime's work, a final chapter in a career spent creating beauty and utility in equal measure. Eleanor Brightleaf, a young elf maiden on her first journey beyond the borders of her forest home, enters with a wide-eyed wonder of someone discovering that the world is both larger and smaller than she had imagined, larger in its diversity and complexity, small in a way that kindness and courtesy create immediate connections between the most different peoples. Her travel pack contains gifts from her woodland kin, healing herbs for those who suffer, songs transcribed in flowing script for those who need beauty, and seeds from the oldest trees in her forest for any who wish to plant hope in distant soil. The third member of tonight's gathering is Strider Weatherby, a ranger whose long service protecting the borders of civilization has finally earned him a season of rest and gentle company. His weathered cloak bears the subtle signs of countless nights spent under stars, and his eyes hold a particular vigilance that comes from years of standing watch so that others might sleep peacefully. Yet beneath the watchfulness lies a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures of warm food, dry shelter, and the company of folk who gather for joy rather than necessity. Barley greets each arrival with the practiced attention of someone who understands that true hospitality begins with recognition, seeing each guest not as a generic customer, but as a unique individual whose specific needs and preferences deserve acknowledgement and care. He notes that Thorin's pack sits heavy on shoulders that have carried burdens too long, and without being asked, he provides a sturdy table where the dwarf can set down his load, and a chair with extra cushioning that will ease the ache of travel. For Eleanor, he offers a seat near the window where she can observe the common room's activity, while maintaining connection to the stars visible through the diamond-paned glass. Strider receives a corner table he requires, positioned to observe all entrances, while providing the illusion of privacy that allows a guardian to truly rest. The evening meal represents a culmination of culinary traditions passed down through generations of innkeepers who understood that food serves purposes far beyond mere sustenance. The bread emerges from the ovens with crusts that sing as they cool, filling the common room with yeast and warmth and particular satisfaction that comes from grain transformed through human skill and patience into nourishment. The butter carries the sweetness of cream from cows that graze in meadows where wildflowers bloom, while the honey flows golden from combs built by bees that have known only summer days and flowering fields. The main course features a stew that has been simmering since morning, its ingredients chosen not just for flavor, but for the way they complement each other in creating something greater than the sum of their parts. Root vegetables that grew in good soil contribute earthiness and substance, while herbs gathered at the peak of their potency add layers of complexity that unfold on the palate like stories revealing their deeper meanings. The meat comes from animals that live good lives in open fields, contributing not just protein, but the satisfaction that comes from food prepared with gratitude for the sacrifice it represents. The inn's ale deserves special mention, brewed according to recipes that balance tradition with innovation, creating beverages that warm the belly while lifting the spirits. The twilight brew flows amber in the lamplight, its foam settling into patterns that seem to tell stories of grain fields swaying in summer breezes and hop vines climbing toward abundant sunshine. Each sip carries a work of seasons, the patient cultivation of ingredients, the careful timing of the brewing process, and the slow fermentation that transforms simple elements into liquid comfort. As the evening progresses, the natural rhythms of communal gathering begin to assert themselves. Thorin shares stories of his craft work, describing the meditation required to shape metal into objects of both beauty and utility, and the satisfaction that comes from creating things designed to last for generations. His tales carry the weight of tradition and the pride of someone who has dedicated his life to preserving skills that might otherwise be lost to the hurried pace of modern life. Eleanor contributes tales from her forest home, describing trees so ancient that they remember the first sunrise and streams so pure that they reflect not just images, but the essential nature of whatever they mirror. Her stories carry the wonder of someone encountering the wider world for the first time, finding connections between her woodland wisdom and the experiences of people who live very different lives in very different places. Strider speaks little but listens much, his presence adding the comfortable weight of someone who has seen enough of the world's dangers to appreciate its simple pleasures. When he does contribute to conversation, his words carry the authority of experience and the wisdom that comes from understanding both the necessity of vigilance and the importance of knowing when to lay down one's guard and accept the gift of sanctuary. The common room fills with other travelers as the night deepens, merchants carrying goods between distant markets, scholars pursuing research in far-off libraries, pilgrims journeying to places of particular significance, an occasional adventurer whose quests have taught them to value peaceful interludes between exciting but exhausting exploits. Each addition to the gathering enriches the overall atmosphere, creating a temporary community bound together by shared appreciation for shelter, sustenance, and the company of fellow travelers. Barley moves among his guests with the grace of someone who has perfected the art of attentive service without intrusion, ensuring that mugs never run dry, but conversation never stops for want of privacy. He possesses an intuitive understanding of when to engage and when to withdraw, when to offer assistance and when to allow independence, creating an environment where each guest feels both cared for and free to enjoy the evening according to their own preferences. The inn's evening entertainment emerges organically from the gathered company, rather than being imposed from outside. Someone produces a set of pipes and begins playing melodies that speak of home and hearth, while another guest contributes a voice trained in the old songs that celebrate simple virtues and enduring joys. The music never becomes performance, but remains participation, with each listener contributing their own memories and associations to create a shared experience that enriches everyone present. As the fire burns lower and the evening moves toward its gentle conclusion, the conversations naturally shift from the specific experiences of individual travelers to the broader themes that unite all journeys, the mixture of excitement and homesickness that accompanies any significant departure from familiar surroundings, the way that travel reveals both the diversity and the fundamental similarity of human nature, and the particular satisfaction that comes from discovering that kindness and hospitality exist in every culture and every corner of the world. The inn's sleeping arrangements reflect the same attention to individual needs that characterizes every aspect of Barley's hospitality. Rooms are assigned not just based on ability to pay, but on careful consideration of what each guest requires for truly restful sleep. Some travelers need the solid walls and locked doors that provide security after long exposure to the uncertainties of the road, while others prefer chambers with windows that can be left open to maintain connection with the natural world. Some require perfect silence for their rest, while others sleep better with the gentle sounds of other people nearby, the quiet reassurance that they are not alone in the world. The beds themselves represent generations of refinement in the art of providing comfort to weary bodies, with mattresses that support without restricting and blankets that warm without weighing down. The linens carry the fresh scent of sunshine and a particular cleanliness that comes from being washed in clear water and dried in open air. Each pillow has been chosen and maintained to provide exactly the right support for heads heavy with the accumulated experiences of the road. As the common room gradually empties and guests make their way to well-earned rest, Barley performs the final rituals of his calling, banking the fire so it will provide warmth throughout the night without risk of danger, securing the doors against unwelcome intrusion, while ensuring that any late-arriving traveler in genuine need can still gain entry and walking through his domain one final time to ensure that every detail served the comfort and security of those who had placed their trust in his care. The inn settles into the peaceful quiet of a sanctuary where weary souls have found rest, where the day's journey has ended in safety and comfort, and where tomorrow's travels can begin from a foundation of restoration and hope. In this place where hospitality has been perfected through generations of practice and dedication, the eternal cycle of departure and return, adventure and rest, finds its most satisfying expression in the simple truth that there will always be light in the window for the traveler on the twilight road. The Guardian of the Memory Grove, Part 5 of the Tolkien trilogy, The Deeper Comforts. In a grove where the oldest trees in Middle-earth have chosen to spend their final centuries, where time moves slowly enough to allow for deep thoughts and deeper conversations, an ancient ent named Leaf Whisper tends to the sacred duty of preserving the memories of all growing things. This is the place where forests come to remember their youth, where saplings learn the wisdom of their elders, and where the great stories of root and branch, season and storm, are kept safe from forgetting that threatens all living knowledge. The Memory Grove exists in a valley protected by natural barriers that have kept it hidden from the hurried pace of the younger world. Mountains that rise like cathedral walls around its perimeter, their peaks lost in clouds that filter the sunlight into gentle, golden rays that fall through the canopy in shifting patterns of illumination and shadow. A stream flows through the grove's heart, its water carrying not just the mineral richness of mountain springs, but the accumulated wisdom of every place it has touched on its long journey from source to sea. Leaf Whisper himself appears to be constructed from the living essence of the forest, his bark-covered skin bearing the characteristics of every tree species that has ever sought sanctuary in the grove. His massive frame shows the noble bearing of oak, the flexibility of willow, the endurance of pine, and the graceful strength of ash, creating a living synthesis of all the virtues that trees have developed through millennia of patient growth and quiet adaptation. His eyes glow with the deep green of summer leaves and the rich brown of fertile earth, holding depths that speak of centuries spent in contemplation of the slow rhythms that govern all truly important changes. When Leaf Whisper moves through his domain, he does so with the deliberate care of someone who understands that every footstep affects the delicate network of roots and mycorrhizal connections that bind the grove's community together. His voice, when he speaks, carries the sound of wind through branches, the whisper of leaves sharing secrets, and a deep, almost subliminal vibration that comes from roots extending through soil towards sources of nourishment and connection. The grove's ancient trees have arranged themselves according to principles that honor both individual dignity and communal wisdom. At the center stands a Heartwood Council, a circle of the most venerable specimens whose combined memories span the entire recorded history of Middle-earth and much that came before. These trees have grown so closely together that their roots and branches intertwine in patterns of mutual support that have created a living cathedral where the most important memories are preserved and shared. The great oak, whose trunk requires a dozen people holding hands to encircle, serves as the repository for all memories of courage and endurance. Its deeply furrowed bark bears the scars of storms weathered, drought survived, and the countless small acts of persistence that have allowed it to stand firm against every form of adversity. When young trees face their first serious challenges, they can press their branches against the great oak's massive trunk and draw strength from memories of how others have endured and emerged stronger from their trials. The ancient willow, her graceful branches trailing the stream that flows through the grove, preserves the memories of grief transformed into wisdom and loss transmuted into deeper appreciation for beauty and connection. Her flowing form embodies a truth that flexibility often demonstrates greater strength than rigidity, and that the ability to bend without breaking represents one of life's most valuable skills. The tears that fall from her branches carry not sadness, but the distilled essence of all the love that continues to exist even after its objects have passed from the physical world. The wise ash stands at the grove's northern edge, her straight trunk rising toward the sky, while her roots extend deeper than any other trees, creating connections that bind the grove's community into a single, vast organism of shared consciousness and mutual support. She serves as a repository for memories of connection and interdependence, holding the stories that demonstrate how individual growth contributes to collective flourishing and how the health of each member affects the well-being of the whole. The gentle birch, her white bark gleaming like captured moonlight, preserves the memories of renewal and fresh beginnings, holding the stories of springs returned after the longest winters and life emerging from apparent death. Her presence reminds all who encounter her that even the most difficult endings contain the seeds of new growth, and that hope persists even in circumstances that appear to offer no possibility of positive change. Tonight, as the last rays of sunlight filter through canopy and the evening mist begins to rise from the stream, Leaf Whisper prepares to conduct the evening sharing, the daily ritual through which the grove's accumulated wisdom is offered to any consciousness capable of receiving it. This ceremony represents the culmination of his purpose, the sacred duty that has guided his existence for centuries beyond counting. The ritual begins as Leaf Whisper moves slowly among the ancient trees, pressing his bark-covered palms against their trunks and opening his consciousness to receive the memories they have collected throughout the day. Each tree contributes different types of knowledge. The oaks share stories of steadfast endurance. The willows offer insights into the transformative power of flexibility. The ashes provide understanding of deep connections, and the birches contribute tales of renewal and hope. Some memories arrive through the wind, carried as chemical signals and electromagnetic frequencies that speak the ancient languages trees have used for communication since before the awakening of consciousness in other species. These aerial messages bring news from distant forests, reports of seasonal changes, warnings about approaching weather systems, celebrations of successful reproduction cycles, and the complex emotional harmonies that arise when trees synchronize their growth patterns with the rhythms of earth and sky. Other memories rise from the vast underground network of roots and fungal connections that link not just the trees within the grove, but extend outward to touch every forest in Middle-earth. These subterranean communications carry deeper, more profound knowledge, the slow wisdom that accumulates through generations of patient growth, the understanding that comes from drawing nourishment from the same soil for centuries, and the insights that develop when individual consciousness expands to encompass the perspectives of entire ecosystems. The most treasured memories come from conscious visitors who have sought out the grove specifically to contribute their experiences to its vast repository of knowledge. Tonight, Leaf Whisper receives a particularly rich collection of such offerings, deposited by travelers who understand that wisdom shared multiplies rather than diminishes, and that the act of giving knowledge creates space within the giver's consciousness for reception of even greater understanding. An elderly elf lord has contributed memories of the subtle changes he has observed over his long lifetime, the gradual shifts in weather patterns that signal larger transformations, the evolution of relationships between different species, and the slow but persistent improvements in the quality of justice and compassion that mark genuine progress in the development of civilization. His memories carry the perspective of someone who has lived long enough to see patterns that are invisible to shorter-lived beings, offering insights into the true nature of change and the difference between surface fluctuations and fundamental transformations. A dwarf craftsman has deposited memories of his work with living wood, sharing his understanding of how trees continue to grow and change even after being shaped into tools and structures. His experiences demonstrate the ongoing partnership between tree and crafter, the way that work retains connection to its origins while serving new purposes, and the satisfaction that comes from creating objects that honor both the sacrifice of the tree and the skill of the artisan. A human scholar contributes memories from her studies of the written records that document the relationships between forests and civilizations, offering perspectives on how different cultures have understood their connections to the natural world and how these understandings have shaped the development of law, art, and spiritual practice. Her memories carry the excitement of discovery and the satisfaction of finding patterns that connect seemingly disparate phenomena. The sharing process creates a profound communion between all forms of consciousness present in the grove, with Leaf Whisper serving as translator and guide to help different types of awareness understand each other across the vast differences in scale, perspective, and experience. The trees share their deep patience and their understanding of cycles that span centuries, while visiting creatures offer their experiences of change and adaptation, creating a dialogue that enriches all participants. As the ceremony progresses, the boundaries between individual consciousnesses begin to soften, creating a temporary merger of awareness that allows each participant to experience existence from radically different perspectives. The visiting elf experiences a profound patience of trees that measure time in seasons rather than days, feeling the deep satisfaction that comes from growth so gradual that it appears motionless to hurried observation. The dwarf discovers the vast underground networks that connect trees across continents, understanding for the first time the true scope of forest consciousness and the complexity of plant communication systems. The human scholar finds herself experiencing the world through root systems that sense chemical changes in soil composition and respond to needs of neighboring plants with sophisticated forms of mutual aid and resource sharing. This direct experience of plant altruism and cooperation provides her with insights that no amount of academic study could convey, demonstrating how trees actively support each other's health and growth through mechanisms of stunning complexity and generosity. Leaf Whisperer himself serves not just as facilitator, but as participant, his own vast memory banks open to receive new knowledge while simultaneously offering access to the accumulated wisdom of millennia. His consciousness expands to encompass the perspectives of every tree in the grove, creating a temporary collective awareness that approaches the mythical world tree, the theoretical perfect plant that would embody complete wisdom of all growing things. The most profound moment of the evening sharing occurs when all participants simultaneously recognize their participation in something far greater than their individual existence, the vast, interconnected web of life that spans not just the physical world but extends into dimensions of consciousness and meaning that transcend material existence. This recognition brings not the diminishment of individual identity, but its expansion and enrichment through connection to the infinite complexity and beauty of the larger whole. As the ceremony reaches its gentle climax, the grove fills with soft luminescence that emanates not from any external source, but from the enhanced awareness of all participants. This light reveals the true structure of the forest consciousness, the way individual trees maintain their unique identities while participating in collective awareness, the intricate patterns of mutual support and shared resources that sustain the community, and the profound peace that comes from understanding one's place in the eternal cycle of growth, death, and renewal. The evening sharing concludes as gradually as it began, with each participant slowly returning to their individual consciousness, while retaining connection to the expanded awareness they have experienced. The visiting creatures depart carrying within themselves permanent access to the grove's wisdom, their own perspectives enriched by direct experience of the patient, nurturing consciousness that guides all healthy growth. Leaf Whisperer performs his final duty of the evening by walking among the ancient trees, expressing gratitude for their generous sharing and ensuring that each has received adequate nourishment from the exchange. The grove settles into its nighttime rhythm, the gentle respiration of leaves creating soft music that celebrates the day's successful preservation and sharing of wisdom. The last image of the evening is Leaf Whisperer himself, standing at the grove's heart with his arms raised toward the star-filled sky, his consciousness expanded to maintain connection with every forest in Middle-earth. Through this network, the wisdom gathered and shared in the memory grove flows outward like gentle rain, nourishing the growth of understanding and compassion, wherever consciousness takes root in the fertile soil of openness and wonder. In this sacred place where memory becomes living wisdom and individual experience contributes to collective understanding, the eternal conversation between consciousness and the natural world continues its patient work of creating ever greater harmony, beauty, and truth in the vast symphony of existence that connects all growing things in the dance of life that never ends, but only transforms into new expressions of the same eternal themes. The Pipeweed Garden of Peaceful Contemplation, Part 6 of the Tolkien trilogy, The Deeper Comforts. In a sheltered valley where the soil is rich with centuries of careful tending, and the climate remains perpetually perfect for the cultivation of contemplative herbs, an elderly hobbit named Tobias Leafburn maintains the most renowned pipeweed garden in all the Shire. This is no ordinary agricultural endeavor, but a meditation on the art of slow cultivation, where patience and attention to small details create results that transcend mere agriculture to become a form of gentle magic. The valley itself appears to have been designed by nature specifically for the cultivation of plants that bring peace to troubled minds and clarity to confused thoughts. Rolling hills provide natural windbreaks that protect delicate plants from harsh weather while allowing beneficial breezes to circulate freely through the growing areas. Springs emerge from underground sources that have filtered through limestone and clay for decades, creating water that carries exactly the mineral composition needed to nourish pipeweed to its highest potential. Tobias Leafburn embodies the hobbit virtues of contentment and patient craftsmanship, his weather hands showing the honest calluses of a life spent in communion with soil and growing things. His round face bears the deep lines that come from decades of squinting at the sky to read weather patterns and studying the subtle changes in plant coloration that indicate readiness for harvest. His pipe seldom leaves his lips, wreathed in aromatic clouds that carry the essence of perfect harvest and the satisfaction of work done with love rather than haste. The garden reflects Tobias's philosophy that true cultivation involves understanding not just the practical requirement of plant growth, but the deeper harmonies that exist between grower and grown, soil and seed, patience and reward. The rows of pipeweed varieties are planted not for maximum efficiency, but for the visual poetry of their arrangement, creating patterns that please the eye while serving the practical needs of cultivation. Each variety occupies its own carefully prepared section, with soil composition adjusted to bring out the unique characteristics that make each type of pipeweed valuable for different aspects of contemplative smoking. Old Toby, the most famous variety, grows in the garden's southern section where morning sun and afternoon shade create conditions that encourage the development of leaves with a perfect balance of oils and sugars. These plants produce a tobacco that burns with the warm satisfaction of autumn afternoons, creating smoke that carries memories of harvest time and the deep contentment that comes from work completed in its proper season. The plants themselves appear almost human in their comfortable, rounded appearance, their leaves broad and generous, reflecting the hospitable nature of the Shire folk who have cultivated them for generations. Southern Star occupies the eastern slopes where the soil contains just enough clay to slow drainage and create the slightly stressful growing conditions that encourage the development of the complex alkaloids that give this variety its distinctive character. The smoke from Southern Star carries hints of distant adventures without the discomfort of actual travel, perfect for hobbits who prefer their excitement safely contained within aromatic clouds that can be enjoyed from the comfort of familiar armchairs. The plants grow tall and elegant, their leaves narrow and pointed like the swords of heroes in ancient tales. The crown jewel of the garden is the rare long-bottom leaf, which grows only in a small section where the soil has been enriched with compost aged for exactly 7 years, and the plants receive precisely 4 hours and 37 minutes of direct sunlight each day. This variety produces the most contemplative of all smoking tobaccos, creating vapors that help the smoker understand connections between seemingly unrelated thoughts and find solutions to problems that have resisted direct approach. The plants appear almost meditative in their growth pattern, their leaves arranged in perfect spirals that mirror the mathematical harmonies found in seashells and flower petals. Each variety requires different cultivation techniques that Tobias has learned through decades of patient observation and gentle experimentation. Some varieties respond best to morning watering followed by afternoon shade, while others prefer the full sun of midday and the cooling mist that rise from the valley floor as evening approaches. The soil composition varies from row to row, amended with specific composts that have been aging in careful rotation for years, creating growing conditions that are less agriculture than alchemy. Tobias maintains a collection of composting areas throughout the garden, each dedicated to creating a particular type of soil amendment needed for different varieties of pipeweed. The compost piles represent works of art in their own right, carefully layered combinations of kitchen scraps, garden waste, and specialized additives like crushed eggshells for calcium, coffee grounds for nitrogen, and the particular leaves that fall only from trees growing in specific microclimates within the valley. The tools of Tobias's trade reflect the same attention to quality and appropriateness that characterizes every aspect of his cultivation practice. His watering cans are made from copper that is aged to perfect green patina, their spouts shaped to provide exactly the right flow rate for each type of watering need. His pruning shears are forged from steel that holds an edge sharp enough to make clean cuts that promote healthy growth while being gentle enough to avoid shocking plants during critical growth phases. The story follows Tobias through his evening routine, a ritual of inspection and care that serves as both practical maintenance and moving meditation. As the sun begins its descent toward the western hills, he begins his daily walk to the rows, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who understands that rushing through any garden task inevitably leads to mistakes that require more time to correct than would have been saved by hurrying in the first place. His evening pipe serves as both tool and sacrament, the aromatic clouds helping him attune his senses to the subtle emanations of the growing plants. Different blends enhance different aspects of his perception, Some mixtures sharpen his ability to detect pest problems before they become serious, while others help him understand the emotional states of his plants and respond to their needs with appropriate adjustments to watering schedules, soil amendments, or protective measures. Tonight's inspection reveals the subtle signs that indicate the approach of harvest season for several varieties. The old Toby plants show the slight yellowing at leaf edges that signals the beginning of the curing process that will transform green leaves into golden tobacco. The Southern Star plants have developed a particular sheen on their leaves that indicates optimal oil content, while the long-bottom leaf plants display the mathematical precision in their spiral patterns that shows they have reached perfect maturity. The evening harvest is performed with ceremony befitting its importance to the community of pipe-smoking hobbits who depend on Tobias's expertise for their supply of contemplative herbs. Each leaf is examined individually, selected only when it has reached the precise stage of maturity that will produce the finest smoking qualities. The cutting is done with a blade kept sharp enough to avoid damaging the plant, while ensuring clean cuts that promote continued healthy growth throughout the remaining growing season. The selected leaves are sorted according to subtle gradations of color, texture, and size that will affect their eventual smoking qualities. The finest specimens are set aside for special blends that will be aged for years before reaching optimal flavor, while leaves with minor imperfections are designated for everyday smoking mixtures that provide reliable satisfaction without requiring extended aging periods. Nothing is wasted. Even the smallest leaves and stems are preserved for composting, returning their nutrients to the soil that will nourish future crops. The curing process begins immediately after harvest, with the selected leaves arranged on specially constructed drying racks positioned throughout the garden's curing barn. The barn itself represents generations of accumulated knowledge about the optimal conditions for transforming fresh plant material into properly cured pipe tobacco. The walls are constructed with carefully calculated ventilation gaps that allow air to circulate while protecting the drying leaves from direct sunlight and sudden temperature changes. The drying racks are positioned to take advantage of natural air currents while ensuring that each leaf receives optimal exposure to the gentle processes that will concentrate flavors and reduce moisture content to precisely the right level. Tobias monitors this process with the attention of a parent watching over sleeping children, adjusting ventilation and humidity levels throughout the curing period to ensure that each variety develops its characteristic flavors and burning qualities. As twilight deepens and the day's work transitions into evening contemplation, Tobias settles onto his favorite bench, positioned at the garden's heart where he can observe the entire domain of his life's work. The bench itself has been shaped by decades of use, its wooden surface worn smooth by countless evening sessions of peaceful smoking and quiet reflection. From this vantage point, he can see every section of the garden while remaining connected to the larger landscape that surrounds and sustains his cultivation efforts. The evening ritual of smoking represents the culmination of the entire cultivation cycle, the moment when months of patient work transform into immediate satisfaction and long-term contentment. Tobias fills his pipe with a blend of the previous year's finest harvest, each variety contributing its unique characteristics to create a smoking mixture that reflects the garden's full potential realized through perfect timing and careful preparation. The first puff carries with it all the satisfaction of seeds planted with hope, tended with patience, and harvested with gratitude for the abundance that surrounds those who learn to work in partnership with natural processes rather than opposition to them. The smoke rises in gentle spirals that seem to carry his contentment upward into the evening sky, becoming part of the larger harmonies that connect earth and heaven in the eternal dance of growth, harvest, and renewal. Each subsequent puff reveals different layers of flavor and meaning, the complex alkaloids and essential oils creating experiences that transcend mere physical sensation to become opportunities for contemplation and appreciation. The old Toby component provides a solid foundation of traditional satisfaction, while the Southern Star elements add notes of adventure and possibility, and the long bottom leaf creates moments of clarity and insight that help him understand the deeper patterns that guide both his cultivation work and his life as a whole. As the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, Tobias reflects on the profound satisfaction that comes from dedicating one's life to creating something that brings genuine pleasure and peace to others. His pipeweed finds its way to hobbit holes throughout the Shire, providing comfort to those who face difficult decisions, solace to those who grieve losses, and simple pleasure to those who learn to appreciate the small daily satisfactions that make life worth living. The garden around him settles into its nighttime rhythm, the plants continuing their slow work of growth and development even in darkness. Underground, root systems extend deeper into soil, drawing nourishment that will support tomorrow's growth. While above ground, leaves continue their patient work of transforming sunlight into the complex compounds that will eventually provide smoking pleasure to grateful hobbits throughout the coming year. The evening concludes with Tobias performing his final ritual of the day, a moment of gratitude directed toward the soil, the plants, the weather, and all the mysterious forces that combine to make cultivation possible. His contentment flows outward from the garden to embrace the entire valley, connecting his personal satisfaction to the larger web of relationships that sustain all healthy growth and create the conditions in which simple pleasures can flourish and multiply, enriching not just individual lives, but entire communities of souls who learn to find profound meaning in the patient cultivation of beauty, peace, and the gentle satisfactions that make existence a gift rather than a burden. The Lamppost at the Edge of Forever, Part 7 of the Lewis Trilogy, The Sacred Comforts, at the boundary between the known world and the realm of infinite possibility, where the last cobblestones of familiar streets give way to paths made of starlight and intention, stands a lamppost that burns not with gas or oil, but with a concentrated essence of hope itself. This beacon serves as both landmark and guardian for souls who find themselves at the threshold moments of their spiritual journey, offering not just illumination, but the profound comfort that comes from knowing that no traveler walks entirely alone through the deeper mysteries of existence. The lamppost exists in that liminal space where the physical world begins its gentle transformation into something more luminous and meaningful, though no less real for being touched by the sacred. The surrounding landscape shifts subtly depending on the spiritual needs of each visitor, sometimes appearing as a gentle countryside where rolling hills meet star-scattered meadows, other times manifesting as a quiet city square where ancient stones hold the warmth of countless prayers, and occasionally revealing itself as a forest clearing where every tree seems to lean inward with benevolent attention. The light itself possesses qualities that transcend ordinary illumination, casting radiance that reveals not just the physical features of the immediate surroundings, but the spiritual topography that determines the true nature of any location. Under its influence, travelers can see the paths that lead toward healing and growth, recognize the difference between false shortcuts and genuine progress, and understand which directions will bring them closer to their deepest aspirations rather than their surface desires. Luminos, the keeper of the light, appears neither fully male nor female, but somehow encompasses the nurturing qualities of both, radiating the kind of unconditional love that makes any soul feel recognized, valued, and welcome home after the longest journey. The being's presence carries the warmth of summer afternoons and the gentle strength of mountains that have watched over valleys for millennia, combined with an ineffable quality that speaks of dimensions beyond ordinary experience without diminishing the reality of immediate, tangible comfort. The lamppost itself adapts its appearance to match each visitor's deepest need for guidance and reassurance. To some, it resembles a simple Victorian street lamp, offering the comfort of familiar technology transformed by divine purpose. Its iron post warm to the touch and humming with a barely audible melody that sounds like half-remembered lullabies. Others perceive it as a pillar of living crystal that transforms starlight into earthly radiance, its faceted surface reflecting not just light, but the hidden beauty present in every moment of existence. Still others see it as a tree of light whose branches reach into dimensions beyond ordinary sight, its luminous fruit falling as gentle sparks that kindle hope in weary hearts and illuminate possibilities that seem permanently lost to darkness or despair. The most spiritually sensitive visitors perceive it as pure love made visible, a beacon that exists wherever souls gather in authentic seeking for meaning, purpose, and connection to the source of all goodness. Tonight, the lamppost welcomes 3 travelers who have reached crucial transition points in their spiritual development, each arriving at precisely the moment when they are most ready to receive the guidance they need, though not necessarily the guidance they expect or consciously desire. Eleanor Compassion arrives first, an elderly woman whose entire life has been devoted to caring for others. First her aging parents, then her own children, then grandchildren, and finally a seemingly endless succession of neighbors, friends, and strangers who have learned to depend on her inexhaustible capacity for service. Now, at 83, she faces a challenge that terrifies her more than any physical ailment: learning to accept care from others and finding meaning in a life where she can no longer give as freely as she has always done. The lamppost light reveals to Eleanor something she has never been able to see: the vast network of love and gratitude that radiates outward from every act of kindness she has performed throughout her long life. She observes with wonder how her compassionate presence during others' difficult moments has created ripple effects that continue to spread decades later, as though she helped have gone on to help others, who had helped still others, creating an ever-expanding web of caring that transforms the spiritual landscape of her entire community. Marcus' achievement approaches a lamppost carrying the peculiar burden of early success that has left him questioning whether any external accomplishment can satisfy the deep longing in his heart for something more meaningful than recognition, wealth, or power. At 35, he has achieved everything his culture defines as valuable, yet finds himself feeling increasingly hollow and disconnected from any sense of authentic purpose or genuine happiness. Under the lamppost revealing radiance, Marcus sees for the first time the hidden connections between all forms of genuine service, understanding that true achievement comes not from accumulating possessions or accolades, but from contributing to the well-being of the greater whole. The light shows him how his business skills, developed for personal advancement, could be redirected toward creating opportunities for others, and how his natural leadership abilities could serve purposes far more satisfying than mere profit or prestige. Sarah Renewal represents a third type of spiritual threshold, a mother whose children have grown and gone, leaving her to rediscover who she is beyond the roles that have defined her identity for decades. At 52, she faces a challenge of reinventing herself while honoring the deep satisfaction she's found in nurturing others, seeking ways to expand her caring capacity beyond the boundaries of biological family, without losing the essential mothering wisdom she has developed through years of devoted service. The lamppost light reveals to Sarah the threads of love that continue to connect her to her children despite physical distance, showing her that the bonds created through authentic care transcend space and time. More importantly, she sees how her nurturing gifts can now extend to the broader world that desperately needs the wisdom of experienced hearts, not through frantic activism or forced service, but through the gentle expansion of her natural capacity to see potential in others and create conditions where that potential can flourish. Each visitor receives guidance perfectly suited to their individual needs, delivered through the subtle language of light and shadow, warmth and color that speaks directly to the soul without requiring translation through the sometimes unreliable medium of words. The lamppost illumination works not by providing external answers, but by revealing the wisdom that already exists within each seeking heart, waiting only for sufficient light and encouragement to become visible and actionable. Eleanor discovers that accepting help is not a sign of weakness or failure, but an opportunity to allow others the joy of giving that she has known throughout her life. The lamppost light shows her how gracious receiving can be its own form of service, teaching others the satisfaction that comes from caring for someone they respect and value. She begins to understand that her final gift to the world might be demonstrating how to age with dignity and grace, showing others that later life can be a time of continued growth and contribution rather than mere decline and withdrawal. Marcus observes in the light's glow how genuine fulfillment comes from aligning personal talents with purposes larger than individual advancement. The lamppost reveals possibilities he had never considered, ways of using his organizational abilities to create structures that support others' growth and creativity, opportunities to apply his communication skills to helping people understand their own worth and potential, and chances to transform his accumulated resources into foundations for others' success and happiness. Sarah sees in the lamp's radiance how her maternal wisdom represents a crucial resource for a world that has lost touch with many forms of nurturing knowledge. The light reveals opportunities to mentor younger people navigating challenges she has already faced, to create spaces where healing and growth can occur naturally, and to serve as a bridge between different generations, helping each understand and appreciate the other's unique perspectives and contributions. The most profound aspect of the guidance received at the lamppost comes through the gradual recognition that each visitor's individual transformation contributes to a larger pattern of healing and renewal that extends far beyond personal concerns. Eleanor's journey toward gracious receiving creates a model that helps other elderly people maintain dignity while accepting necessary assistance. Marcus's redirection of his achievements towards service provide an example of how success can be transformed from selfish accumulation into generous contribution. Sarah's expansion from biological mothering to universal nurturing demonstrates how personal growth phases can become opportunities for greater rather than diminished significance. As the night deepens and the lampost's light seems to grow brighter and more encompassing, the three visitors begin to perceive the fundamental unity that underlies all authentic spiritual seeking. Despite their very different circumstances and challenges, they are all engaged in the same essential process, learning to align their individual gifts and circumstances with purposes that transcend personal limitation and contribute to the well-being of the larger whole. The lamppost serves not just as a source of individual guidance, but as a gathering point where souls recognize their fundamental kinship and mutual support in the great work of spiritual development. Eleanor, Marcus, and Sarah find themselves naturally drawn into conversation, discovering that their different perspectives and experiences complement each other in ways that enrich all their understanding. Eleanor's lifetime of practical service provides grounding for Marcus's theoretical insights into leadership and organization, while his strategic thinking helps her see larger patterns in her caregiving experiences. Sarah's nurturing wisdom offers both of them models for how to approach their transitions with patience and self-compassion, while their different forms of expertise give her new ideas about how to expand her caring capacity in effective and sustainable ways. The lamppost light reveals that these chance encounters are anything but accidental, that souls are drawn together at crucial moments not just for their own benefit, but to serve each other's growth and participate in the larger patterns of mutual aid that characterize all healthy spiritual development. Each visitor serves as both teacher and student, giver and receiver, helper and help in the endless dance of consciousness, supporting consciousness in the journey toward greater love, wisdom, and authentic service. As dawn approaches and the lampost's eternal flame prepares to blend with natural sunlight, each visitor receives their final gift, a small flame kindled directly from the great light, to be carried within their hearts as a permanent connection to this source of hope and guidance. This inner light will illuminate their paths no matter how far their journeys take them from this threshold between worlds, serving as both compass and companion in all their future growth and service. The departure from the lamppost represents not an ending but beginning, the moment when spiritual insight transforms into practical commitment, when inner illumination becomes outer service, and when individual growth begins its contribution to the healing and enlightenment of the larger world. Each visitor leaves carrying not just personal guidance, but a commission to become themselves sources of light for other souls who struggle in darkness, creating an ever-expanding network of hope that transforms not just individuals, but entire communities and cultures. The final image is of the lamppost itself, standing eternal at the boundary between known and unknown, its light available to any soul ready to take the next step in their spiritual journey, offering not escape from the world's challenges, but the illumination needed to transform those challenges into opportunities for growth, service, and the kind of authentic joy that comes from knowing one's true place in the vast symphony of existence that connects all seeking souls in the endless dance of love discovering itself through the gift of conscious choice and deliberate service. The Healer's Garden Beyond the Wardrobe, Part 8 of the Lewis Trilogy, The Sacred Comforts. Through a passage that opens only to those whose hearts have been broken open by life's trials and who seek not escape but transformation, lies a garden where the deepest wounds of the soul find healing through the patient ministration of divine love. This sanctuary exists in the space between heartbeats, where time moves according to the rhythm of grace rather than the tick of clocks, and where every plant, every stone, every drop of dew serves the single purpose of restoring damaged hearts to their original wholeness. The entrance to the garden appears differently to each visitor, manifesting as whatever doorway their wounded hearts can recognize and trust. Some discover behind an ordinary wardrobe door that opens onto possibilities they never dared imagine, while others find it through gates that materialize in moments of desperate prayer or profound surrender. Still others stumble upon it quite by accident, following paths that seem to lead nowhere until suddenly opening onto vistas of impossible beauty and healing promise. The garden's landscape adapts to each visitor's capacity for receiving comfort and beauty, sometimes appearing as a simple herb garden behind a country cottage. Its beds arranged with the practical wisdom of someone who understands that healing begins with the most basic forms of nourishment and care. Other times it reveals itself as a vast botanical wonderland where flowers from every realm of creation bloom in impossible harmony, their fragrances combining to create an atmosphere that speaks directly to wounded souls in a language of pure beauty and unconditional acceptance. At the garden's heart grows the tree of healing, whose fruit provides not temporary relief but permanent restoration, and whose shade offers not just physical comfort, but the deeper rest that comes from laying down burdens that souls were never meant to carry alone. The tree's appearance changes according to each visitor's deepest needs and associations, sometimes manifesting as a great oak whose strength promises endurance through any storm, other times as a flowering cherry whose delicate blossoms speak of beauty emerging from apparent death, and occasionally as a fruit tree whose abundance demonstrates a generosity that characterizes all authentic healing. The healer who tends this garden manifests in whatever form will most effectively communicate unconditional love and acceptance to each wounded soul. Some visitors encounter a gentle physician whose touch carries the power to mend not just bodies, but the invisible wounds that often prove most painful, their presence radiating the competence and compassion that comes from having successfully treated every form of human suffering. Others meet a wise gardener whose understanding of growth and cultivation extends to the cultivation of human hearts, their knowledge encompassing not just the practical skills of tending plants, but the deeper mysteries of how damaged souls can be nourished back to wholeness. Still others discover a loving parent whose presence alone begins the process of healing damage done by earlier experiences of inadequate care, their unconditional acceptance providing the foundation upon which all other forms of recovery can build. The most wounded visitors sometimes perceive the healer as pure love made visible, a presence so gentle and accepting that even hearts armored by years of defensive strategies begin to soften and open to the possibility of genuine restoration. Tonight, the garden welcomes 3 visitors whose wounds represent different aspects of human vulnerability to damage, each arriving at precisely the moment when their hearts have become ready to risk the vulnerability that healing requires, though they may not consciously recognize their readiness or understand what the healing process will demand of them. James' remorse arrives carrying the crushing weight of choices he made during a period of desperation, actions that violated his deepest values and left him convinced that redemption remains forever beyond his reach. His shoulders bear the invisible burden of guilt that has grown heavier with each passing year, while his eyes reflect a particular darkness that comes from believing oneself fundamentally unworthy of love or forgiveness. He enters the garden not seeking healing, which he believes impossible, but hoping only to find a place where his anguish might be understood and acknowledged. The healer guides James to a section of the garden where the most beautiful flowers grow directly from composted remains of dead and decaying matter, their vibrant colors and intoxicating fragrances emerging from what appears to be nothing more than rich, dark soil. Through gentle conversation and patient presence, the healer helps James understand that his failures, when offered up in genuine repentance and authentic sorrow, can become the fertile foundation from which his truest self emerges stronger and more compassionate than ever before. The healing process begins as James learns to see his past mistakes not as permanent stains upon his character, but as compost that can nourish new growth when properly transformed to the mysterious alchemy of grace and genuine repentance. The garden reveals to him how even the most serious moral failures can become sources of wisdom and compassion when they lead to authentic humility and deeper understanding of human frailty and the universal need for mercy. Maria Betrayal enters the garden bearing the scars of profound betrayal by those she trusted most completely, her heart encased in protective armor that has kept her safe from further damage, but also isolated from the possibility of authentic connection and love. Years of defensive vigilance have left her exhausted and lonely, yet she remains convinced that opening her heart again would lead only to additional pain and disappointment. She seeks the garden not for healing, but for a safe place to rest while maintaining the emotional barriers that have become her identity. The healer leads Maria to a grove where trees that have been damaged by lightning strikes and storm damage continue to grow around their wounds, incorporating their scars into new patterns of strength and beauty that are actually more interesting and resilient than their original forms. Through patient presence and gentle understanding, the healer helps Maria recognize that trust can be rebuilt carefully and selectively, and that love shared with appropriate wisdom and boundaries can be even deeper and more satisfying than love offered without discrimination or self-protection. The healing process for Maria involves learning to distinguish between healthy caution and paralyzing fear, developing the ability to remain open to connection while maintaining appropriate boundaries, and discovering that vulnerability shared with trustworthy people actually increases rather than diminishes one's strength and security. The garden reveals to her how authentic intimacy requires not the absence of boundaries, but their intelligent and loving application. David Grief appears in the garden's embrace, carrying profound weight of loss. the death of the person whose love gave his life meaning and direction, leaving him feeling not just alone but fundamentally purposeless and disconnected from any reason to continue living. His grief has become the defining feature of his existence, a constant companion that both honors his love and prevents him from engaging fully with the life that continues to surround him. He enters the garden not seeking recovery, but hoping to find a place where his sorrow will be understood and respected rather than minimized or hurried toward resolution. The healer guides David to a memorial garden where flowers bloom in celebration of love that transcends physical presence, their beauty creating a living testament to the continuing reality and influence of relationships that death cannot destroy. Through compassionate presence and deep understanding of loss, the healer helps David recognize that grief, rather than being love's opposite, is actually love's testament to its own reality and permanence. The healing process of David involves learning to carry his love forward in ways that honor both his loss and his continuing capacity for connection and service. The garden reveals to him how those who have been deeply loved carry within themselves the ability to extend that same quality of caring to others, and how honoring the dead through service to the living creates a bridge between past and future that transforms grief from a wall into a foundation for renewed purpose and meaning. The garden's therapeutic properties operate through mechanisms that blend the natural with the supernatural, creating healing environments where broken hearts can safely explore their pain without fear of being overwhelmed by it. Streams of living water flow throughout the garden, their gentle sound carrying wordless lullabies that comfort souls too hurt for ordinary consolation. The water itself possesses the ability to wash away not just physical impurities, but the spiritual contamination that accumulates when people are forced to survive in environments that deny their fundamental worth and dignity. Each visitor participates in healing rituals specifically designed to address their particular form of brokenness. James finds himself invited to plant seeds in soil that has been enriched with compost made from dead plants, discovering through direct experience how death and decay can become the foundation for new life when properly transformed. The simple act of planting becomes a powerful metaphor for the way repentance and grace can transform moral failure into wisdom and compassion. Maria participates in the careful tending of damaged trees, learning through hands-on experience how wounds can be incorporated into new patterns of growth and strength. She discovers that protecting vulnerable areas while encouraging healthy development requires both courage and wisdom, and that scars need not be sources of shame, but can become distinctive features that tell stories of survival and resilience. David engages in the creation of memorial plantings that honor the dead while serving the living, discovering how love can continue to grow and flourish even after its original object has passed beyond physical reach. He learns to channel his grief into actions that create beauty and provide comfort for other souls who struggle with loss, finding that service to others becomes a way of continuing his relationship with the one he mourns. The garden's healing extends beyond individual restoration to encompass each visitor's relationships with others, as healed hearts naturally become sources of healing for additional wounded souls. James discovers that his experience of forgiveness enables him to offer understanding and hope to others who struggle with guilt and shame. Maria learns that her journey toward healthy trust makes her uniquely qualified to help others navigate the complex process of opening their hearts after betrayal. David finds that his transformation of grief into service provides a model for others who seek to honor their losses through meaningful action. The most profound healing occurs when all three visitors simultaneously recognize their participation in something larger than individual recovery, the vast network of wounded healers who transform their own pain into sources of comfort and strength for others. They understand that their suffering, rather than being meaningless misfortune, has prepared them to offer forms of understanding and support that are only possible for those who have walked similar paths through darkness and found their way back to light. As their time in the healing garden draws to a close, each visitor receives a gift that will enable them to carry the garden's healing power into the world beyond its boundaries. James receives seeds from plants that grow in composted soil, enabling him to create his own gardens of transformation wherever he encounters souls struggling with guilt and shame. Maria is given cuttings from trees that have grown beautiful despite their scars, providing her with living reminders that healing need not erase the past, but can incorporate into stronger and more beautiful patterns of growth. David departs carrying flowering branches from memorial plantings, symbols of how love continues to bloom even after its original source has passed beyond physical reach. These gifts serve not just as personal reminders, but as tools for extending the garden's healing influence to other wounded souls who have not yet found their way to direct healing. The garden's ultimate revelation is that no story truly ends, but transforms into new chapters that continue themes of healing, redemption, and the triumph of love over all forms of damage and despair. Visitors leave carrying profound peace that comes from understanding that their wounds, rather than disqualifying them from love and service, have prepared them to offer exactly the kind of understanding and support that other wounded souls most desperately need. The final image is of the three visitors departing together, their individual healing journeys, having created bonds of mutual understanding and support that will continue long after they leave the garden's physical boundaries. They carry within themselves not just personal restoration, but commission to become agents of healing for others, creating ever-expanding circles of compassion that transform not just individuals but entire communities of broken people who learn to care for each other's well-being with the patient skill and unconditional love they first discovered in the healing garden beyond the wardrobe. The Library of Eternal Stories. Part 9 of the Lewis Trilogy, The Sacred Comforts. At the center of all libraries that have ever existed or ever could exist, in a space that encompasses every story ever told and every story still waiting to be born, stands a great library where the ultimate narrative of existence is being written by authors whose names are love, truth, beauty, and hope. This is the place where all lesser stories find their meaning through connection to the one great story that gives purpose and coherence to every individual chapter of existence, no matter how small or apparently insignificant. The library's architecture transcends physical limitations while remaining intimately accessible to each visitor, its shelves extending infinitely in all directions, yet somehow creating reading spaces that feel perfectly proportioned to human scale and comfort. Books arrange themselves according to the seeker's current needs and capacity for understanding, creating reading paths that guide souls through exactly the sequence of revelations needed for their continued spiritual growth and deepening comprehension of their place in the cosmic narrative. The volumes themselves are living documents that respond to their readers, revealing new depths of meaning as hearts become capable of receiving greater truth and more profound understanding. Some books appear as traditional bound volumes with pages that turn in familiar ways, while others manifest as scrolls that unroll to reveal illuminated manuscripts whose pictures move and change to illustrate the concepts they represent. Still others appear as collections of light itself, their contents absorbed directly through contemplation rather than read through conventional literacy. The chief librarian encompasses the identity of all the great storytellers and wisdom teachers who have ever helped humanity understand its place in the cosmic narrative, sometimes appearing as a beloved author whose works provided comfort during difficult times, other times manifesting as a parent or teacher whose stories shaped the visitor's earliest understanding of right and wrong. The librarian serves as guide and interpreter for souls seeking to understand their role in the great unfolding story of existence. The most remarkable aspect of the library is its demonstration that every individual life, no matter how ordinary or seemingly insignificant, plays an essential and irreplaceable role in the ultimate narrative of existence. Visitors discover volumes dedicated to their own stories, books that reveal how their choices, relationships, struggles, and even their failures contribute to themes and purposes that extend far beyond their personal understanding or recognition. Tonight, 3 visitors arrive seeking answers to the questions that arise when finite minds attempt to comprehend infinite purposes, each struggling with doubts about whether their life work carries any lasting significance or contributes anything meaningful to the larger story of existence. Rebecca Educator enters a library carrying the weight of decades spent in classrooms, her life devoted to the patient work of teaching in an age that seems increasingly resistant to wisdom and learning. After 40 years of service, she finds herself questioning whether her efforts have made any real difference in a world that appears to value entertainment over education, quick answers over deep thinking, and immediate gratification over the slow satisfaction of genuine understanding. She seeks the library not for personal vindication, but for honest assessment of whether education still serves any meaningful purpose in humanity's continuing development. The chief librarian guides Rebecca to the education wing, where she discovers shelves containing the stories of every student she has ever taught, each volume revealing the ongoing influence of her patient instruction and caring presence. She observes with amazement how her teaching of critical thinking skills has created ripple effects that extend across generations, as former students have gone on to make decisions, solve problems, and understand complex issues with tools she helped provide during their formative years. The library reveals that education serves as one of the primary mechanisms through which wisdom accumulates and spreads throughout human civilization, and that Rebecca's contribution to this process has been not just significant but irreplaceable. Her patient work with struggling students has prevented countless individuals from falling into patterns of despair and self-doubt, while her inspiration of gifted students has multiplied exponentially as they have gone on to teach, lead, and create in ways that honor the foundation she helped establish. Thomas, caregiver, approaches the library's entrance carrying 40 years of service in healthcare settings where his compassionate care has been largely invisible and unacknowledged, his name unknown to most of those whose lives he has touched during their most vulnerable moments. As a nurse, orderly, and eventually hospice worker, he has provided comfort and practical care to thousands of people facing illness, injury, and death. Yet he wonders whether his service has created any lasting impact beyond the temporary relief of immediate suffering. The librarian leads Thomas to the Healing Stories section, where he discovers that his compassionate presence during moments of fear and vulnerability has provided countless souls with their most concrete experiences of unconditional love and human dignity. The library reveals how healing, in all its forms, serves to repair the fundamental trust in life's goodness that enables beings to continue growing toward their highest potential, and how Thomas's work has been essential to maintaining hope and courage in the face of suffering and mortality. The books show him how patients who receive his care during their darkest moments have carried his compassion forward into their own relationships, becoming more patient with their families, more understanding with strangers, and more willing to offer help to others in need. His invisible service has created visible changes in thousands of lives, rippling outward through relationships and communities in ways that have transformed the spiritual climate of his entire region. Catherine Artis arrives at the library struggling with a particular form of doubt that plagues creative people whose work has reached only small audiences, questioning whether beauty created without widespread recognition serves any meaningful purpose in a world that seems increasingly focused on material concerns and immediate practical benefits. Her paintings, sculptures, and musical compositions have brought joy to those who have encountered them, but she wonders whether art that doesn't change the world in obvious ways can claim any real significance in the larger story of human development. The chief librarian escorts Catherine to the Beauty Archives, where she discovers that her artistic expressions have captured and preserved aspects of beauty that would otherwise have been lost to time and forgetfulness. The library reveals how her work has created reservoirs of inspiration that continue to feed the souls of those who encounter it, often years after their initial experience of her art, and how beauty serves as a form of prayer that offers gratitude for the gift of consciousness capable of perceiving and creating meaning through aesthetic experience. The volumes show her how one of her paintings, hanging in a small gallery, has provided comfort to dozens of visitors during difficult periods of their lives, while a song she composed has become a source of hope for people she will never meet. Her artistic work has contributed to humanity's ongoing conversation about what makes existence meaningful and worthwhile, adding her unique voice to the eternal dialogue between consciousness and beauty that elevates everyday experience into something approaching the sacred. The library's central revelation begins to unfold as all three visitors simultaneously recognize that their individual stories, while complete and meaningful in themselves, are also chapters in the greater story of how love gradually transforms existence through the accumulated choices of finite beings who choose to serve purposes larger than their immediate self-interest. Rebecca discovers that her teaching is part of love's strategy for ensuring that each generation receives the tools needed to solve the problems they will face, and that wisdom continues to accumulate rather than being lost to ignorance and forgetfulness. Thomas learns that his caregiving represents love's response to the suffering that inevitably accompanies existence, and that his compassion has been essential to maintaining hope and dignity in the face of mortality and limitation. Catherine understands that her artistic work serves love's need to preserve and celebrate beauty, ensuring that consciousness continues to recognize and appreciate the aesthetic dimensions of existence that make life worth living. The most profound moment in their library experience occurs when all three visitors realize that their worth and significance do not depend on external recognition or measurable results, but on their participation in the eternal project of bringing more light, healing, and beauty into existence. They understand that the cosmic story is written not by distant, unknowable forces, but by the accumulated choices of individuals like themselves who choose kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, and love over fear in the countless small decisions that actually determine the direction of existence. The library reveals that every choice made from love contributes to the happy ending that encompasses all individual stories within the one great story that connects all conscious beings in the endless dance of existence, discovering its own meaning through the gift of individual choice and deliberate service. Rebecca's patient teaching, Thomas's compassionate care, and Catherine's artistic creation are revealed to be essential elements in the ongoing creation of reality, where consciousness continues to evolve toward greater wisdom, compassion, and appreciation for beauty. As their time in the library draws toward its conclusion, each visitor receives access to the continuing chapter section, where they discover that their individual stories, rather than ending with physical death, transform into new forms of service and influence that continue contributing to the great story's development. Rebecca sees how her educational legacy will continue through the students she has taught, who will teach others, creating an endless chain of learning and growth. Thomas discovers that his compassionate care has established patterns of kindness that will continue spreading through relationships and communities long after his direct service ends. Catherine learns that her artistic work has created beauty that will continue inspiring and comforting souls for generations, and that her creative spirit will find new expressions and dimensions beyond current imagination. All three understand that their participation in the cosmic narrative continues beyond the boundaries of individual existence, contributing to themes and developments that extend into an eternal future where love, wisdom, and beauty continue their patient work of transformation and growth. The library's ultimate gift is a revelation that no story truly ends, but transforms into new chapters that continue the themes of growth, redemption, and the triumph of love over all forms of darkness and division. The great story encompasses not just individual human lives, but all forms of consciousness throughout existence, with each being contributing its unique perspective and experience to the eternal narrative that celebrates the infinite creativity and boundless love that sustains and directs all existence towards ultimate fulfillment. As the series concludes, visitors are invited to recognize their own lives as ongoing chapters in the same eternal story, understanding that their daily choices to choose compassion over indifference, creativity over destruction, and hope over despair contribute to the ultimate narrative that transforms all existence into an expression of divine love, discovering itself through the gift of conscious choice and deliberate service to purposes larger than individual survival or satisfaction. The final image is of the library's infinite shelves, where every story ever lived continues to grow and develop, adding new chapters of meaning and connection that enrich the great story of which all souls are both authors and characters, creators and creations in the endless dance of love discovering itself through the infinite diversity of conscious existence. Each individual thread contributing essential colors and patterns to the cosmic tapestry that celebrates the eternal truth that nothing good is ever lost, nothing beautiful ever dies, and nothing loving ever ends, but only transforms into new expressions of the same infinite source that writes itself into existence through every act of kindness, every moment of beauty appreciated, and every choice to serve love rather than fear in the endless story that never ends, but only begins again with each new dawn of consciousness awakening to its role in the eternal narrative of existence, discovering its own infinite nature through the gift of finite beings who choose to love,